Today we have with us Arul Amudhan Gunalan, Director of Marketing and CX at Skellam AI. And today we will be discussing the business of CX. Welcome to the show, Arul.
Thanks, Arul. Nice meeting you.
Yeah. So I'll just get straight to it. Sometime back, the term UX or user experience did, catch the fancy, and a lot of people know what is UX. But CX that way is a relatively new term. So for those of our readers and viewers who don't know about CX, I mean, if you could tell them what exactly is CX and why is it so important in today's world?
So CX, it stands for customer experience, right? And it's basically an end-to-end touch point, like every point where the customer touches your business. It could be before your sales, it could be during your sales, all your marketing communication, during the sales process, and even past it, right, as they use your product. The idea is that they should have the best experience possible, right? So the customer experience has become more and more critical right now because with most of the tools that we use are SaaS tools. People prefer being independent, and then they want to be able to like self-serve it and do it at their own pace as well, right? So we used to have control over when people interacted with us. It could be either at your store, it could be when they come to your website, it could be through a webinar and all of those things. But with more and more digitization coming in, more and more people preferring the comfort of the couch and the mobile phones, your transaction could happen at any time, right? So it becomes more and more critical that at every touch point that the customer has with you, you give them best experience. That's the main thing.
That's the basics of CX. Now, you cannot stop but talk about the pandemic. So one of the things that has happened in the pandemic is the tech acceleration or technological acceleration. So everything is being digitized or digitalization, whatever you call it. So the way we do business has changed. So now, I mean, I would presume that for any business, they'll have to implement CX at the core of their strategy. So what do you think of the latest changes and the CX at the core of the strategy?
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. And as a digital marketer myself and somebody who's been in the digital transformation space, the pandemic has actually helped the transformation like accelerate. Right? It is an unfortunate turn of events, but one thing that came out was that businesses actually understood the importance of a digital presence. Right? Companies which are not investing in any of these things before, they are doing more and more invest in it. Right? Starting with just take something as simple as education, right? Which was almost the same for like some 20, 30 years, which didn't change much at all. Even with the computer labs and all of it coming in, it was pretty limited on what people were exposed to. And suddenly you had this full acceleration where you had all of these different tech startups come in. You have Google Classroom come in, you have the widespread adoption of like learning modules and all of it. And so it has actually accelerated much, much faster, right? And this is technology that's been available for like 5-6 years now, but then nobody actually wanted to invest in it. So that has actually changed a lot of different things, right? And that could also be a primary example of customer experience as well. Like if you take a student and how they actually use your product versus how a teacher uses your product for ed tech. And that's something that people can visualize immediately, right? And how user-friendly they are and how good they are. The main reason that we're having this call on Zoom and how Zoom has taken over is that Zoom is much easier to use than most of your other tools as well, right? So it's been focused on not just the technology part of things, which have been available for a long time, even with broadband coming in. It's been mostly the experience of using it, how fast it is, because we have more and more people who have not been exposed to technology that much before. We have senior citizens, we have students, you have people who didn't have access to smartphones and all of it before, who are like now buying smartphones. So it has actually expanded and it's actually created this whole different thinking among people, right? And now that with most of the brands not actually being able to go and touch people like, in events or in your point of sale stores and all of those things. So what happens now is there's an even playing field between a startup and a technological change as well. So now it comes to basic thing that you can actually differentiate right now is your customer experience. So most of your products are commoditized. People can just change from one product to another. It's like pretty easy. They can just uninstall and install. So all it comes back to is like, okay, no, if your customer experience is good, you get to keep your customer. So that's the main thing. Yeah.
So that way I agree. I mean, the pandemic was a tragedy, but one thing is there that we have come out of it and we have adopted ourselves, and we have changed the way we operate and behave, and CX is no exception. So
Yes. Yes.
yeah, so I was just thinking, like then what were like the CX trends that were there like the pre-pandemic? How did the trends change during the pandemic, and what are the specific trends going forward you think will be cemented and they'll become long-term trends?
Sure. So pre-pandemic, you had a mix of different ideas, right? So we had traditional ideas, even in marketing. They were like you were looking at events, you were looking at like on-field events, you were looking at people going out other places and selling things. Um, Most of that has changed. It will now become more and more. People are still trying to like figure out like what worked for them last year. You had like overwhelming webinars everywhere. People are doing online events and all of it. They're just like trying to do what they're doing physically out there as well. But now people have found that okay, there's a medium between that, right? They moved on from all of that, where you like more of a push marketing to more of a pull marketing, which is like traditional digital. And you see more and more of these people exchanging in that sense, right? Now we don't force people to buy a product. You tell people go and try my product. You try it for 30 days, you like it, then you like continue with us. You're betting on your product in that sense. You have much more product led growth coming in. People are thinking about like how people are using the product. So this has changed a lot. It used to be before that, okay, let's get the customer in and then let's see what they can do for the customer, right? Even though people are calling themselves as a SaaS system or a product, most of the solutions where like, once you get a client in, you're going and fixing things for them. So all of that has changed. Now it has to work, right? It has to work right the first time. So those things have changed. And going forward, I think that's going to be something that's really, really going to be important. You also see lots of these niche e-commerce sites like also like going through, right? Taking Nika as an example, you have Mama Earth coming in, where these brands would have been like just one of many that came in and went, and without a store presence, they wouldn't have had the same reach that they had this time, right? They were there before the pandemic as well, but they're all like really specialist things that people are looking for. Now they're household names because like everybody's able to go and so what has changed is that like if you have a good product and if you're able to get the product across and you have good messaging for it, you're going to see the value and people are realizing that. So it's going to be good for the customer going forward actually. So
Yeah. So, I mean, one thing like that has changed. Another thing has changed is the way the data is coming in and processed. Because before you had like, paper data, hard data, and you'd go through it. But now there's a flood of data. It is more dynamic. It is more real time. So, I mean, one of the key things to manage it and predicting the needs of the customer is AI, or artificial intelligence.
yes,
So maybe if you could talk of this data explosion and what role AI is
definitely.
playing in
Yeah,
managing and predicting the needs of the customer.
that's a really good point. As part of an AI startup myself, what we're working towards is actually getting this data together, right? So basically, what we are trying to do is we're trying to put the data together from multiple touch points that a store or e-commerce enterprise might have, right? You could be having data from your point of sales terminal, you have data from your website, you could have data from a mobile app and so on. And before this, your data was like fragmented. People didn't even worry about data, right? Point of sale systems like it used to have like different variations of your name, just like going in. Data was not collected properly. People are not looking at loyalty in that sense as well. They're not trying to market it. Um, so what is happening right now is that with this data, uh, it comes back to like two things right now, right? There's an explosion of data and also an explosion of marketing as well based on our data. So we are seeing more and more email marketing coming in. You're being flooded with emails, you're being flooded with SMS messages. So what you need to do is like how we're going to stand out across all of this, right? So it becomes actually personalizing offers. It's not just changing a name in the email and sending it out anymore. It's actually messaging that actually needs to go out, right? So that's where AI comes in, where it's able to predict uh, what kind of messaging works for what kind of person, right? What we are working is that what kind of offers will work for what kind of person. And all of those things, it comes in much better because you need to stand out in this flood of different messaging that's coming in. So that's where AI is going to come in, because people are mostly using AI as a cleanup mechanism, and without much data coming in, your AI was basically useless. It was actually harming most people than actually doing good for the business. But now they are investing in it, they are seeing the value in it, and they're able to work with people and give AI time to learn, and also give them benefits as well. So that's where the personalization is going to be the main thing that's going forward. And we are calling it hyper personalization, where it's not just just putting somebody's name and company in there. It's actually like seeing that what kind of things they like. So that's where changes are going to be.
So anyway, I like that hyper personalization. I guess that is really one trend which has caught on, and I think it's going to become quite big in the future.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Because it smooth past the point, right? As we're talking about acceleration.
Right.
People who didn't know about most of these things right now know about this, right? Your AI chatbots, when they came in, were like no big deal, because they were like, okay, we can actually uh, most of customer service and give them a much faster access and all of it. But now people are seeing the limits of AI chatbots, right? It needs to go beyond that and see like what it can do for a person. Your e-commerce stores and almost everything is like now commoditized as well, right? So now it becomes like, okay, how do I actually give the right value to right people, right? One good example is like what Netflix is trying to do, between like just your profile versus your wife's profile and your kid's profile, like what kind of messaging comes through. Apparently they are even like looking at not just giving you different titles, but actually giving you like different images for those same titles as well, right? So that kind of like personalization is like coming in. It's already here, and it'll become mainstream soon.
So I'll just ask one last question. I noticed, one very interesting, your title is Director of Marketing and CX. So, I mean, that is also a, sign of the change of the time. So what about the use
It
of
is.
CX in any company's marketing strategy? Is it easy? Is it necessary? So I think you're the right person to answer that, since you're handling both
Yeah.
CX and marketing.
So that's the main thing. Like I was actually telling this to somebody like last week as well. So what happens is that now there's different hats, right? It used to be like, okay, in marketing, you just like get a set of leads and you hand over to sales and you just wait for them to convert and you just like sit back. Now we are like working with sales, like I'm handling the sales as well. And you're looking at like, okay, not just the quality of leads coming in, like what kind of messaging goes out to these people, right? We are working on that. We are working on like retaining the people. We're working on getting reviews out of them. We are trying to close the feedback loop back to the product team, where we are trying to see that, okay, like what kind of, so just look at what features we're selling, actually looking at what features are actually useful for the client, right? And then it becomes a different mindset for marketing as well, because it actually makes marketing easier, because now you know exactly what a client wants. But that also means that your marketing is more truthful than what it used to be. So, but it's a good place to be. Yeah, it's actually like different thinking that needs to come in that sense.
So, I mean, it's like no longer silos. The customer data comes, whatever AI sees, personalization, sales, marketing, it all seems
Yeah.
to be, merging. You're no longer in
Hmm.
silos. So that's a new way
Yes,
of
yes.
doing business, I'd say, I guess.
Definitely. I mean, I was part of a company where we had CRMs, but we had a separate marketing CRM and separate sales CRM.
So anyway, so I
Yeah.
guess it's very
But now we
exciting.
are like seeing that
Yeah.
uh,
No, no,
now all of
sorry.
this
Please
comes in, right? It's
continue.
not a
Yeah.
black hole anymore. It's not a
Yeah.
black hole where it goes to sales and you just don't hear back from them anymore, right?
Right.
It's actually much more interactive.
Yeah.
You get to see what's happening, and it
Yeah.
goes beyond that, where you're actually looking at like what customers doing as well. So it's really interesting in that sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I like that hyper personalization, breaking down of silos, merging. I mean, the cloud is making everyone in one place right now, both the customer and the marketing. I guess they're
Definitely.
standing in the
That's
same
what I'm
place
trying
as
to
of
say. Like
now.
basically, like marketing,
Yeah.
like we used to use these keywords, it was more
Yeah.
buzzwords.
Yeah.
But now we actually use them because we have to use them, and it's actually like like it's actual value that we're providing the clients.
Yeah.
So I think that's where it difference. Yeah.
Yeah. So finally, then one big idea that will take CS in the 2020s, will it be like hyper personalization, or what do you think is the one big idea that is going to, transform CX and business?
So hyper personalization is the main thing.
Okay.
Both from your marketing all the way to your funnel, right?
Hmm.
The customer journey, every touch point of the customer journey is going to be like personalized for you. You're going to get the relevant messaging that's needed. You're going to get the relevant products that you're going to be interested in. You're going to get just like what you need to be using, not just because it's a platform, nobody's going to go, force everything else on you. Even Microsoft doesn't do it anymore. So that's where the thing is going to be. The customer is going to be like pampered, and the customer is going like, it might be creepy at times. Hopefully,
Yeah.
people like step back a little,
Yeah.
but hyper personalization is going to be the main thing going forward.
Yeah. I just shudder to think what will happen when the metaverse comes. So
That's going to be like, that's something like literally that you need to wrap your head around things.
yeah.
So let's see. I mean, people are just coming in terms with like,
Right.
basics of digital marketing.
Right.
So hopefully
Right.
metaverse doesn't like scare people off.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true.
Yeah.
So anyway, thank you for that great overview about CX and where it's heading. Thank you, Arul.
Thanks, Arul. Thanks.